Hey, this is Troy Taylor with the Championship Football Coaches Clinic podcast, sponsored by Reps, Virtual Reality, First Down Playbook, Rack Coach, Tip of the Spear, the Top Hopper, and Sports Workbook. Today, we have Coach Bob Trott, former NFL and former college defensive coordinator. And throughout the years, Coach Trott has been so good to me. And Coach Al Groh brought him to UVA. That's when I first met him. So, Coach, for everybody that's out there that's watching or going to watch, tell us a little bit about yourself, Coach, and where you're from.
Well, I'm from Kannapolis, North Carolina. I played at the University of North Carolina, and that's where I met Al. He was the outside linebacker coach. And, I tell young coaches all the time, every day is an interview. And you got to approach that. Every day is a job interview in this business. And when Al went to Air Force, I got a call one day in June, and it was Bill Parcells. And he said, "You want to come to Air Force?" And he said, "I can't pay you very much." I said, "Yes, I want to come." So that's how I got to Air Force and got started in my college career. But it was all based on, working at Carolina as a GA for 2 years, and Al Groh, I guess I impressed him enough that he gave my name to Bill, and that's how that got started. Bill left after a year, and Ken Hatfield became the head coach. And I stayed with him 5 more years at Air Force. And I was there when he put the wishbone in. A lot of people think it was Fisher to Berry, but we hired Fisher, but Ken Hatfield caught all the plays, and he's the one that got it all started in the academies. Then went with him to Arkansas. My last year there, I was a coordinator, and then I went to Clemson with him, and I was a coordinator there. And then in this coaching business, I'm at a track meet in May, and I get a phone call from Ray Hanley, and he was on that staff at Air Force, and he was actually on that staff at West Point when Al was there, and Bill Parcells and all that group was there. He was in ROTC too, and Ken Hatfield was there. So Al was actually the defensive coordinator of the Giants, and Ray had taken over and said, "I need some names for this position we're thinking about." He called me up and said, "Well, Bob, you're the only guy on this list I know. Will you come?" So that's how I got to the Giants. So after that, I went to the Patriots, coached my second time with Coach Parcells. Then went down back to college to Duke, coached with Fred Goldsmith at Duke, and then Carl Franks, and then ended up down at Baylor with Kevin Steele. Ended up at James at ULM, Louisiana Monroe, for a couple of years. Went back up to the Cleveland Browns with Romeo Crennel, who I coached with. I was in the same office for 5 years with him at the Giants and the Patriots. And from there, I went with Al back the 5th time I'd been with Al Groh, working with Al Groh at Virginia, and that's where we met. From there, I went to Richmond and then JMU and then down to East Carolina for a year. So a lot of places. Lucky to work with a lot of good coaches and good players. I was on some really great teams and on some really bad teams, like all of us are.
Yes, sir.
It's more fun to be with a good team.
I totally agree. And, Coach, you're one of the first people that I talked to, probably because you're one of the first NFL guys that ever got a chance to spend some time with. Because, I mean, you took my whole staff at Meadowbrook when you're at Richmond, and you met with us for hours. But you said that you learned from the players. Willie McGinnis was one of the guys you mentioned. Like, talk a little bit about that, learning from the players, Coach.
Well, it's, and you just got to learn to listen. And I learned a lot from high school coaches. I love to go out in the spring, and I tried to, some people said I spent too much time with the high school coaches, but, some of the greatest coaches in this country are high school coaches. And I just love to go visit with them and talk to them and learn from them. And the same thing you learn from the players, as a coach, I think the longer I've done this, the more I've tried to say, well, why? Why did you do that? From a player's perspective, from a coach's perspective. We're always learning. And all you have to do is ask players, why guys watch the young guys, and if they start getting off message, we go grab them and pull them out of the room. There's one message we're going to give, and that's what Bill says, and that's the way it's going to be. And Belichick had created a culture that this is the way we do things, and if you don't like it, you can leave. But if you stay, we're going to win Super Bowls. And Willie passed that on to me, and a lot of things about Willie, why did you do this? And you learn that with all your players. Sometimes we just don't ask why enough, or what did you see? And it's amazing what you can learn from players.
Yes, sir. So the one thing I heard about Coach Belichick is that he is the greatest listener of all time. And that's something I'm working on, Coach. So, what do you know about Coach Belichick as a listener?
Well, it's interesting. I've never coached with Bill, but, it's one of those situations being around Al and Rack and all those guys. It's happened a couple times. It happened with Danny Rocco. I'd never coached with Danny Rocco, and he came up to UVA one time. I said, Danny, I've heard your name for 20 years. I feel like I know you. And same thing with Bill.
Yeah, the video is going a little bit like it's just a picture of you, Coach, but we still got you on the voice, so it's okay. If we can get the video back on, that's good, Coach. If not, it's okay with just having your picture there because I'm talking to you.
And the thing with Belichick, it was like I always knew him. The first time I ever met him was he came out to work out Steve Atwater, and we've stayed in touch ever since. He's been really good to me, and he's always listening, as you said. I remember there were times he told me he saw our championship game at JMU, said we should have won the second game, and he said, you got any players? So it was always and I'd call and congratulate him or something, and it was all like, hey, you got any players this year? And I remember one time when I was at the Browns, I asked him about a team we were getting ready to play, and he sent me a 3-page email about everything about that team. And so he always listens, but he's very intelligent. He knows what he wants, and I see a lot of Parcells in him, from that whole group that we're all in.
The OOUs.
Oh yes, it's all part of the tribe.
One of us. So, yeah.
And I heard you ask Al about Bill, and Bill and Al had some great answers. And people ask me all the time about Parcells. I said, well, deep down, he's just a fundamental football coach. And you see a lot of coaches get out of that sink, and they talk about a bunch of stuff. But, Parcells, he told those players pretty quick, blocking and tackling is still really important. And he had that focus that everybody understood that I better be good about blocking and tackling in the fundamentals, or I'm not going to make this football team. And he had that strong will. I remember when we first went to New England, they'd had like 30 hamstrings the year before. And Bill gets up there and says, if you're not in shape, you're going to have hamstrings. And if you have hamstrings, you're not going to make that team. And I think we had 2 that year. And it was almost like from just a strong will of his that if you want to make this team, you better get in shape, or we're not going to have hamstrings. So we didn't have hamstrings. And but he's a fundamental, strong, old-fashioned football coach that knows what he wants. And he was the true manager of the team. It was his team. And I remember walking in his office, and he's just staring at the personnel board constantly. And he's like Al said, he managed the team. He knew what was going on special teams and offense and defense. And this is how we're going to play. And if I tell you to run the ball, we're going to run the ball. And if I tell you to play defense this way, this is how we're going to do it, because I see the overall picture. And taught me a lot.
Yeah, Coach McNally, I was talking to him earlier today, and just thinking about Coach Belichick. He asked me. He said, "Do you think Bill Belichick knows that I'm on Twitter? Do you think Bill Belichick looks at my Twitter?" And I said, "I don't know, Coach, but I'm gonna try to find out." And I don't think Coach Belichick has Twitter, but he is always wanting to know, something. Mm-hmm.
And I worked with Coach in Hampton, Sydney. He came down, spent the day with me. We looked at all this stuff, watched the videos, came up with a plan. And I remember texting Al, and I texted Bill. I said, "What do you think about this Seattle tackle?" Well, Al came back and gave some great points. He studied it. And Belichick at first said, "I don't know what you're talking about." There's several things I texted him. "What do you think about this?" He said, "I'll check it out." Because he wants to learn and listen to it.
He's a lifelong learner.
And that's Seattle tackling. I think it's helped the game. Made it safer. Al had one good point. If it helps you, if it keeps you from missing tackles, it's a good thing. My big thing was it's hard for me to say don't get your face across on a tackle. But after I watched a lot of the video, a lot of those Seattle tackles did have their face across too. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's helped the game, and I'm glad we tried to institute it at the last couple places I've been to. I think it's helped.
Yeah, so
it's just an example of somebody, and it was pretty smart on their part. They watched rugby. And when you think about it, well, they tackle in rugby. They don't wear helmets and things. So it made a lot of sense to a lot of people.
where he's been, Coach. Like, he coached at West Point with Bobby Knight. Do you think that Bobby Knight and his high school coach, playing for Vince Lombardi, like, do you think that influenced Coach Parcells?
Oh, absolutely. I remember George Young told me that his assistant kept telling him, he said, "It's in the book. It's in the book."
Ooh.
And
the
George
book.
Said, what book are you talking about? He said, "It's in Bobby Knight's book. Everything that Bill's doing is in Bobby Knight's book. Just read the book." And so, I think we're all influenced by the coaches we're around and the people we've learned from. And obviously, you think about West Point at the time. Bill was a young defensive line coach. Bobby Knight was a young basketball coach. Their best player was Krzyzewski. And Al and Ken Hatfield and Ray Hanley and all these guys, they're right out of college, so they're 22 and 23. And they built those lifetime bonds. And, when Bill Parcells became a head coach at Air Force, he hired Ken Hatfield, who was at Florida as the offensive coordinator. He hired Al Groh as the defensive coordinator. He was at Carolina with me, and he hired Ray Hanley from Stanford. So he immediately went to the guys that had been with him from the start.
Yeah. And guys are always asking me, they're always watching the podcast, and they always want to know, how do I move up? Well, you probably should have coached with somebody who's going up. And if you haven't coached with somebody who's going up, you better be the guy going up. So what advice would you give to young guys out there, Coach, that want to move up, that want to go to college, want to go to a bigger school? What advice would you give those guys?
Well, number one, treat every day like a job interview.
Ooh, we started with that.
And number two, build that network of coaches that you know. I think young coaches that, in FCS and stuff, going to these camps and meeting all these new coaches. I think high school coaches learning from college coaches. Just in the Richmond area yourself, you got some great resources of coaches that live in Richmond that I'd have over every week. Come spend the day with me. I'll buy you lunch. Or I'm going to go to Richmond and spend the day. I'm going to go up to JMU, spend the day. I'm going to go over to William and Mary, spend the day. And learning, and then how you treat yourself and show these other coaches. That's how I think that for the most part, it's how you build that network and show people what you can do. But I think you got to treat every day like a job interview. You never realize, and I tell players all the time, everything you do, somebody sees. Don't kid yourself. Everything you do, somebody sees. And as Bill Parcells used to say, you got to get noticed. Well, there's two, and I used to tell the players, there's two ways to get noticed: for something good and for something bad. And you don't want to get noticed for bad things. But that clinic you went to, don't think that somebody didn't see you and saw you in either a positive light or a negative light.
Yes, sir.
But I think, build that network up. And don't worry about moving. There are two ways. I was never a coach that looked for the other job all the time. And I've coached with guys that spend every day looking for the next job. Do the best you can at the job you're doing. Build up that network, and things seem to work out okay. But if all you're doing is worrying about the next job, and I've seen guys move up a lot, and it works that way sometimes. But I never like to work for somebody that spent all day working for the next job.
Yes, sir.
We had our own job to do. Do the best job you can. Treat it like an interview every day. And then either my friends are going to hire you or I'm going to hire you. And, there are two types of recommendations, Troy, I've learned in this business. Sometimes you recommend somebody to get rid of them. And sometimes you recommend a guy because you really want to recommend him. And, and you've seen it too. You've had guys recommend people to you. And sometimes you just shake your head and say, why is he recommending this guy?
Yeah.
Well, I've learned over the years, you recommend some guys to get rid of them. And some guys you really, and I used to always ask, I said, well, would you hire him? that usually gets them on the stick right there. If they hesitate, then you know what kind of recommendation that is.
Yes, sir. And ever since I've started these podcasts, you hear about Bill Parcells, you hear about Bill Belichick, but some of the coaches that you don't hear about are the guys like Mike Pope and Jim McNally and Bob Sanders, Clyde Christensen. I've had all these guys on the podcast. Who you mentioned Jeff Hansen before we got on here, Coach. Who are some of the coaches that you've worked with who aren't household names that are some of the best coaches you've ever worked with, and why? Why are they so good?
Well, I was fortunate after with Ken Hatfield, we had a run at Air Force in Arkansas where we basically were the same staff. Fred Goldsmith, Wally Ake, Roger Henshaw.
Wow, I forgot about Wally Ake.
And I've left out some guys, but we were all a staff together, and we worked for a guy that you worked your butt off for Ken Hatfield because he treated you so good. I worked for other coaches, and because they threaten to fire you every day. So both systems work. But, those guys, we won a lot of games at Arkansas and Air Force. There's so many that I've worked with. Recently, Byron Sweet was with me a couple times. Jeff Hansen. We've just had you try to surround yourself with good guys like that. When I went to JMU, Mike didn't really know who to hire as a defensive line coach, and I gave him a couple names, and finally I just went in there and said, Mike, all the guys I keep bringing up are all taught by Jeff Hansen. Why don't we just hire Jeff Hansen? And Mike didn't know Jeff, and he brought him up there, and spent some time with him, came out and said, well, do you think he would relate with our players? I said, well, 8 JMU players just came up to tell him hello. So he must have had a pretty good impact with him.
No doubt.
So we were lucky enough to get Jeff. And you know, one thing about Jeff Hansen, he coaches you hard, but I've never seen a guy that cares more about his players. And I think players know when you're real. They know when you really care about them. And, you know, good coaches get the players on the same page. And I've learned over the years that when you go to a new place, and I've been in these transitions where you've got to earn the trust of the players, and it's hard sometimes. But once you earn their trust, you know, they'll play really hard for you. And but it takes a lot of work. And you just can't assume that they're going to trust you. And but we would bend over backwards. I've learned when Coach Dooley left and Coach Crum came in, there was this divide, and I never understood why there was a divide between Coach Dooley and Coach Crum's players. Mac Brown came in, I think united a lot of the players at Carolina and said, we're all Carolina guys. Quit worrying about who your coach was.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, has developed a great football family atmosphere so that former players feel good about going back to Carolina. I think that's one of my pet peeves at a lot of schools I've been back with. You know, when you're there, they talk about family and this and that. And then as soon as you leave, you're not treated like a family. And a lot of schools need to do better at that. Not just have a golf tournament once a year and hope everybody shows up. But,
yes, sir. I went down to UNC and I was so impressed with everything that they have going on down there and the coaches. I mean, there's NFL guys walking around. I mean, just, you know, Coach Christensen, the former Ravens defensive coordinator. I mean, they just got so much experience. So I loved it.
Clyde was my college suite mate. So
man.
We still kid Clyde because he showed up and he was an option quarterback. And we said, aren't you supposed to be about 20 miles further down at Raleigh? Why are you here? But, you know, Clyde's one of those, I don't know if he's ever told you the story. He called me up and he said, I'd just gotten out of the NFL. And he said, Bob, I got a chance to go to the NFL. I said, what do you think? I think he was at Clemson at the time. And I said, well, Clyde, it really depends on who you're working with. How well do you know this Dungy guy? He said, well, our families vacation 2 weeks every year with him. I said, why are you calling me? And, paid off pretty good for him.
Yeah, it did, Coach. And he's a wonderful person and a wonderful man. I enjoyed having him on the podcast. Coach, when we came and met with you at the University of Richmond, you kept referring back to the book. And I texted you, and I don't even know if I should talk about this on here because I don't want anybody really to learn about it. But, hey, my friend Shane told me, Troy, don't do the podcast. You're going to talk too much. So the book, Coach.
Well, I called it the Football Bible.
The Football Bible.
And it's really just football. And I've learned over the years that, you know, you got to teach your players football. And things that I've learned over the years and I learned it from a lot of different people. And it was just like simple things like, you know, we all talk about after a turnover, what's the offense going to do? And I tried to make it as real as possible. And, you know, I'd always ask players, and I did it every team I've been with. I said, okay, after a turnover, what's the offense going to do? And I got a variety of answers, you know. I said, well, let's think about it. We're over there on the bench. We might have just gotten off a 12-play drive, and the offense fumbles. And you got to throw your water down because you're ticked off. And you're running on the field, and the offense is running off. And we all know how there's a lot of words being said on both sides, and everybody's mad. And you get out on the field, and the offense knows what's happening. They know that you're mad and you're ticked off, and you just had to throw your water down, and everybody's yelling. There's a lot of words being said that you can't repeat. So that's why they take a shot. And
take a shot.
And so I said, so what are we going to do about that? We all know what they're trying to do. So, that's why teams started, try huddle before you go out, remind everybody they're going to take a shot. And it's a simple thing. But you see it. It's funny, the more I brought up these things about, after a big play, a lot of teams will go to tempo. Third and short, they're going to do a hard count. It became a joke. We would do our Thursday practice where we do the script like the game, and we'd always start on the goal line, and we'd always do a hard count. We're JMU, and I think 4 weeks in a row, the offense jumped off sides. I said, come on, fellas. You're trying to get us to jump off sides. But, the players bought into that, and you just hammer it, all these different things. And it never failed. A guy would come up to me on Monday and said, Coach, you're so smart. I saw this same thing on Sunday. I saw him take a shot after a turnover. Or I saw him, things that we've talked about. And it's really situational football and is really hammered into me in the NFL. But it's being a smart football team. We all talk about, stupid teams lose, smart teams win. And you never know how much your players listen, Troy. You know that. And I read an article a couple of years ago. One of my former JMU guys got an interview with the Ravens, and in the article, the Ravens asked him, where did you learn our terminology? Why do you know all our terms? And the young man put in there, well, Coach Trott beat it into us when I was a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And I never thought he was listening, but I guess he was. But, we try to teach football, situations that are just basic things. And, Troy, I've learned that if you do too much, we talk about moving parts. You take a defensive player, he's got to learn all the defense, and they learn all the special teams because most defensive players run all the special teams. That's a lot of stuff. And I used to kid the quarterbacks. I said, you meet more than anybody. Why do you make mistakes? I don't understand it. I said, when we do special teams meeting, you guys are meeting. We do defensive meetings, you guys are meeting. We do things on the field, you're over there throwing. Why do you ever – I don't understand why a quarterback makes a mistake. You meet more than anybody on the whole team. My guys have to learn all the defense and all special teams. Y'all don't have to learn anything. But they don't usually like that. But, so you're trying to teach basic things, and we would hammer it it got to the point where the players knew exactly when I'd say something. What the situation was going to be. And we got pretty good at it. And, and I wanted the entire team. It's just like I took the approach that, it's funny. I asked every team, I said, every team I've been on, offense and defense, pros in college, there was always one player that would jump off sides. And you'd see the players, they all start nodding. JMU, the guy raised his hand. He said, that's me, Coach. I said, I've been doing this for a long time. You're the first guy to volunteer that you're the guy. But we all know there's the guy. I said, so what are we going to do about the guy? I said, so here's our approach. When it's third and short, we know they're going to hard count. I don't care if it's the corner. We're all going to go up and remind this guy, watch the hard count. And that's the best we can do as a team is everybody else is going to go up and remind him and do our best that this won't happen. Now, if he still jumps off sides, then it's my job to get him off the field. But we're going to take an approach that we're all going to help this guy because we know he's the guy. And most of the time it worked, but sometimes I had to, you got to get off the field. We know you're going to do it.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Coach. Just get the guy off the field. If it's a situation where you think they're going to jump off sides, get that kid off the field. That's a great plan.
But, sometimes he's going to be on the field. So,
yeah.
I'd always approach things, well, how can we fix it? What's the best way to fix it? And sometimes it might be the corner coming up, say, hey, watch the hard count this time. And that would fix it. Because sometimes you can't get him off the field. But, if everybody's in tune and the team's talking, that's another thing Willie McGinnis told me, too, about the Patriots when they were rolling. And he said that, we all talked. We all knew our jobs. And so we all talked. We helped each other out. We reminded guys of everything. He did tell me a story that, Belichick's got him so in tune there that he came to him one time before they put the field turf in that this team does not play very well when it's a bad field. So Thursday we're going to practice on the game field. We're going to water it before we go out there and tear it up. And the players were like, "Yeah, that's great. We're with you, Bill." So that's what they did. So,
man, sounds like some things I've done there, Coach. Man, so
well, we're not going to talk about things that you've done, Troy.
I'm not going to admit to anything, Coach. They're going to have to figure it out. So, like, after an incompletion, after a TFL, after a sack, those are some of the things, Coach, like, I was like, wow. And I still use it today. And it's just from meeting with you that one time. Like, you just changed my whole paradigm. Like, talk about that, Coach, after a certain play is ran and, like, the result of the play.
Well, one of the things I always looked at was 2nd and 10. And I was up at Michigan State this fall, and they even carried it on when you broke down their tape. They would put 22-10. And I asked him, I said, "What's the 2-2?" He said, "That's a 2nd and 10 after an incomplete or a 0 gain."
Yes. Yeah.
And, I would look at it as a play caller. I wanted to see, well, what do they do after an incomplete pass? You'd be surprised that in a normal situation, if they threw an incomplete pass, they would run it the next down or vice versa. They do opposite. Sort of talking about, you were talking about analytics. That's one thing that, as I studied that, and, coaches have been analytical ever since I was a GA. We always looked at things like that. But I also noticed it might be 50-50 after a 2nd and 10, but depending on what was happening in the game, that could change. If they were behind, all of a sudden they were throwing it.
Yes.
Time.
Yes.
So you had to when I break games down, I wanted to, I told the coaches, we want to get a picture of what this offense is doing so we can give it to the players.
Mm-hmm.
And we taught them personnel. We taught them all this. We would talk in terms of personnel and offenses. So I tell them, I said, this is an 11 personnel grouping, but they're going to get in a 20 look and they're going to get into an 11 look, or they're going to get into a 10 offense, based on what they do with their positions. And that's how we tried to teach them, this isn't 10 offense. Now, it might be 11 personnel because they're fortunate enough to have a tight end they can stick out there, and he's just a big wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
I remember Marshall Faulk, when he played in the NFL, he was one of the first guys they could line up in 21 personnel and put him out there, and he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. So they were suddenly an 11 team, 11 offense, even though they were 21 personnel. So we tried to teach our players that kind of stuff to give them a picture of what this offense did, and tried to talk about why they did certain things. And when we game planned, the more I got into it was like, okay, why is the offense doing this? Well, let's don't do that. I remember when teams started going one back years ago. It was sort of odd. All of a sudden, they're one backs. Everybody checked 3. I remember when teams started going empty. We all just checked 3. Well, we all blitzed them, but, and then we learned that they're going to do this all the time. So we can't just get stuck on one defense. So, teams have learned to play a different variety of defenses when they get in empty. But you had to study it. Well, why are they getting in empty? What's their reasoning? And then we don't want to do what they want us to do. It's like bunches. For a long time, we would check out of man coverage in bunches because they got in bunches to get you out of man. Well, we're doing what they want us to do, and we don't want to do that. I remember we got pretty good. My better teams that could communicate, we got to the point where if an offense checked, they looked over to the sideline and we would check, and got pretty good at it. You know, if they check, we can check.
Mm-hmm.
I was told by an offense coordinator one time, "You can't do that." I said, "We just did it." We certainly can do it. And so we try to take the approach, what's the offense trying to do? And let's don't do that. You know, let's be in control of what we're trying to do. So that's sort of the approach we took. So we tried to give them a picture of the offense, but we tried to teach that football Bible of, you know, what's going to happen. Why is an offense doing this at this time? And then we just talked about it all the time. So we just beat it into the players where they knew. You know, the other thing I used to talk about all the time, Troy, is, you know, the old talk about it's not what I know, it's what you know.
Yeah, and Willie McGinnis, I remember told you that he didn't want to hear it if it wasn't 80%. Is that right? Is that right? Am I right on that?
Percentages, that's correct.
Yeah.
But the thing I always added about it's not what I know, it's what he knows in the fourth quarter.
Okay.
I started adding it. Well, it's not what I know; it's what he knows in the fourth quarter when he's tired. It's easy to know things when you're fresh, but you know, when they get tired, can they respond and can they perform at their best? And I think you have to plan that way. But you're right about Willie. He said, you know, don't give me these percentages unless it's 80%. And he's right. You know, my tips and reminders, I quit doing all these percentages and things. You know, I just tried to be real of what we're doing. One thing I started doing in tips and reminders is I didn't just give it to them. I gave them a quiz, and I would ask them the questions, and they had to fill it out, and I would check it. And basically, I was like, what do you do in cover 5? Or what are you going to do in this situation? And I made them repeat what I taught them all year or all week. And so it was partly quiz and partly, and at the end of it, I gave it back to them. I said, here's your tips and reminders. I'm not just going to give you the stats. I'm going to make you respond to me so that we're on the same page. I was always a believer it's not too late until the kickoff. Mm-hmm. If I could fix something on Saturday morning, I would fix it on Saturday morning. But, you know, it was a way for me. It was just like, you know, one of the best things, Troy, you can do is put a player on the board. Now, it's pretty humbling sometimes. But you can't put everybody on the board. So these quizzes I would give them, I quit trying to say test. I said the test is the game, but I'm going to give you a quiz. And at the end of it, these are your tips and reminders. Another thing we did in spring practice is I gave them a test every day. And basically it was like what we put in the day before. And so it might be we put in cover 5. So I would make them tell me the next day what cover 5 meant to them. And it was, you know, if you're safety, it meant something different than a corner. Sometimes it might be something really simple, and sometimes it took 2 or 3 things. I said, tell me what you're thinking about when you hear cover 5. And it was sort of a pop quiz type thing, and we did it for the entire defense. And I'd take it up and look at it and give it back to the position coaches. It's also a good thing for me to see make sure the D-line was hearing what we were wanting them to hear. But it was like asking every player to get on the board and say, you know, coach me on cover 5. And what I learned from that was you got to think like a football player. We all went to college. We all went to high school. We all went to school. We all know how to play the game. The more you write on with a teacher, the better grades you get. You know, how many kids, Troy, if you ask a question, they repeat the question back to you? One of the oldest tricks in school.
I don't know, but somebody taught me that, Coach. And every time someone says, you know, Coach, what color pants are we going to wear this week? I don't know. What color you want to wear? I mean, that's that's one of the best things I ever learned.
Well, I'll give you an example. So I would give them this box, and they'd answer the question. Well, I had a linebacker come in, Coach, I don't understand why I'm not playing. I said, well, you got the highest GPA on the team. He's a dentist today.
Mm-hmm.
I said, how do you learn? He said, I memorize everything. I said, well, that's your problem. You have to memorize. I said, when I give you these quizzes, I mean, you are putting all this stuff down in this box. There is no way that you think of that you just saw the signal in 25 seconds, they're snapping the ball. You can't think of all that. But that's how you learn. So I started trying to teach. You got to learn like you're in the heat of battle. It's not like school. In school, the more you write, the better grades you get. The more BS that you can write, most teachers will give you a better grade. Well, that's not happens on a football field. So when I tell you what's cover 5 mean, it should be point, that's it.
Yeah.
You saw the signal, you got 25 seconds before they snap the ball. Something goes through your brain, and I want to know what goes through your brain so that we're on the same page, or we can fix it or make it better.
And that's the same way the special forces learn, Coach. I had a guy on here that's developed virtual reality where you pretty much wear the goggles, Coach, and you watch practice. And there's a few words. There's a few commands. Like when you're in, that's how they train those guys. So, I mean, it's the same thing, Coach. It's exactly what you're talking about.
To learn, in the heat of battle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can't have no dissertation. 2 deep, 500 man. Boom. I don't know.
So you're trying, to me, and that goes back to learning from the players. And sometimes they put some things down. I'm like, you're right. That makes sense. But you sort of mold the way they think, because to me it was almost like a checklist. When I see this coverage or I hear this call, what's going through my head before they snap the ball. And if too much is going through their head, then that's too many moving parts. Football's not that hard. If they can't execute what you're trying to do, then it's way too much.
Mm-hmm.
Some players can do more than others. I remember when we were first at Air Force, we had all these smart kids. But I've coached at Duke, I've coached at Air Force, and a lot of people say, what's the difference between the kids? I said, they got higher SAT scores than everybody else. But they're not necessarily better football players just because they're great students. And you've coached guys, too, that are really good students and aren't very good football players.
Yeah, and I've coached guys that couldn't pass, but they know more football than most high school coaches.
One of the smartest kids I ever coached was a guy named Chris Harris, who was just left the Commanders and went to the Titans.
Mm-hmm.
And but he had a 2.2 in college. But he's one of the smartest smart kids I've ever had, and now he's been in the NFL coaching for a long time.
Wow.
But I've had some guys that are 3.8s and 3.9s that aren't very good football players. Great kids, and they're making a lot of money and doing all that stuff. But that's why, not everybody's the same. We're coaching human beings. Some people don't understand that. Well, why does this guy do this? I said, well, I don't know. He's a human. He screwed up. It's like I used to tell some people, they'd ask me after a game, well, what happened? I said, I don't know. Do you get all your people to come to work every day? The difference is we're in front of everybody, and I don't know if your guy didn't come to work that day. So,
yeah, Coach Bald, my buddy, he wants to know, he put a comment in here. He said, do you have any funny Bill Dooley stories?
Coach Dooley. I was a walk-on. I went to school on a Cannon Mill scholarship, a textile mill scholarship. I still want to keep playing, so I was lucky enough I did pretty good that first spring, and Coach Dooley would see all the players after the spring, and I remember I walked in there and he started shuffling the players around, shuffling all his papers around. I finally realized he didn't know who the hell I was. But we used to laugh about Coach Dooley. Now, Coach Dooley, he fed us really well. He did like to eat. And we'd always get tickled because we'd eat family style for dinner during the season. he'd come through the line, and he'd have that plate piled up so heavy, and at the end he'd always ask for some sweet and low. And, but Coach Dooley was, when I got into coaching, I was lucky enough to be a GA there. One of the first things that hit me about Coach Dooley was, wow, he took a lot of crap for us that I'd never seen that side of coaching. And, as a young GA and a young coach, I was like, holy crap, he takes a lot of crap for us that we don't realize. And, I don't think I ever heard any of his coaches calling Bill. It was always Coach Dooley. He just had that much respect.
Mm-hmm.
But he was always good to me, and I miss him. And I tried to stay in touch with him. And, but he was a player's coach, and I remember we played Nebraska in the Liberty Bowl my last year there. And Troy, you've never seen so many ISOs in your life. I
don't know, Coach. I played at LC Bird, and I coached at LC Bird, and that's the only play we ran this year, Coach. Every time to our sideline.
Well, you're talking about two teams. Both teams, that's all they ran. Those fullbacks, I don't know how they survived.
Which game is it, Coach? Because I want to watch this, because there was a guy on the internet saying that the counter tray came from Nebraska. And I find that hard to believe, because Joe Bugle coached offensive line for Woody Hayes. And I'm pretty sure they ran counter at Ohio State.
I think it was the 77 in Liberty Bowl. It was funny, too. They wore their red jerseys, and we wore our blue jerseys. But I remember the last drive, I was up in the press box with Coach Groh, and they ran like 6 ISOs in a row, and I said, the pass is coming. Sure enough, they threw the ISO pass and won the game.
Man. They hit a receiver over the top, or a fullback like on a pop pass?
The receiver over the top. They just faked it.
Yeah.
Our cornerback got sucked up.
And the safeties and everybody. I mean, it's just
still works.
Yeah, it's still good. I mean, I listened to the Cool Clinic, the Las Vegas Raiders offensive line coach. He talked about lead. ISO was the first play he talked about.
Oh yeah,
it's the first play I put in wherever I go.
Well, it's funny, football goes in and out. I did spend 9 weeks up in Michigan State this fall as a consultant. Don't think that they don't still run the football in the Big Ten. And Michigan's got 2 great running backs.
And Michigan hit an ISO, I mean, the first play, I think, against Texas Christian. I mean, boom.
Well, and another point, Coach Hansen and I talked about that. I was fortunate enough that at Arkansas, at Richmond my last year, we had that great running back. And then Jacoby at JMU. We won that national championship. We both talked about it. One reason we won the national championship at JMU was we had a great running back, and super unbelievable running back. And it's still true today. If you can run the ball and do some things and find that special running back that rises. I used to use the term rise above coaching.
Yeah.
On paper, well, that guy's blocked, but. He talked about Lawrence Taylor when you talked about with Al. Al, Lawrence Taylor is one of those guys that rose above coaching. You couldn't block him with one guy. On paper, he's blocked.
Man.
Well, great running backs. Yeah, you got him tackled, but he still gained 5 yards on you.
Yeah.
We used to talk about in the NFL with Emmitt Smith. He never fell backwards. He always knew when the journey was over, and he'd make 2 more yards. And, Emmitt Smith's not big, and he's a squatty little running back. And I've been fortunate enough to be around some teams that had great running backs that people don't realize how important they were. We're talking about Al. Just let me throw this out. I remember I was fortunate enough when I was at JMU. He called me up one time because Jacoby did a press conference at the end of the game. Al called and said, that was the best I've ever seen. That kid took no credit and gave it to everybody else on your football team. And then the 2 championships we went to, Al was the on the radio.
I told him he's the best color guy, and Gruden and Madden are the best, but Coach Groh is right there. I loved him.
I was fortunate enough that he did a couple of our playoff games. He spent some time with us. And, he just sort of laughed at, yeah, I know what you're doing, And I said, "What you ought to." He taught me most of it. And but I was fortunate enough that he got to see us win the national championship and spend some time with us. And, so that was neat for me to have him there.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. And I mean, I used to go up there when he got the UVA job. And I actually remember, do you remember the Monday night game that he coached with the Jets? And I think they came back and beat, I think it was the Dolphins. And he was the head coach. And I remember watching it at my grandma's house, but I used to go up there and watch him practice. I mean, in the staff that he had at UVA, I mean, it was amazing. And it was like a football encyclopedia. I told somebody he's like artificial intelligence for Coach Parcells and Coach Belichick. I mean, that podcast he did was the greatest podcast ever on Parcells and Belichick. I mean, I love him. Coach Groh can do no wrong in my mind. I love him.
I've worked with him for 5 times. Sometimes I was ready to hit him, but a lot of times, when I was at UVA that last year, he probably did one of the best jobs I've ever seen in my life when we played North Carolina. He stayed up all night and did this tape, and he got our defense in there, showed this tape, and convinced them that we were tougher and more physical than Carolina knew what was coming, and those players played that way, and we beat them down at Chapel Hill, and I'm like, wow, that was unbelievable what we just did. And he took some ordinary players and rose them above their ability, and we won a big game down there. And it was all down to that video that he showed those players and convinced them that we were going to win that game.
That's what he told me when he talked to me on the phone. He talked about toughness. And he said, well, Troy, you need to show your players what you mean by tough, because your definition of tough might be different than theirs. And I said, well, Coach, we watched the 2012 LC Bird team beat Ocean Lakes, and they ran ISO and power every play against about 20 D1 players. And he's exactly right. You got to show them. You got to show them what you mean by toughness. And I assume that's what he did that day.
He showed them. He showed clips of them not being tough and showed clips of our guys being tough.
Man,
they were one of the best jobs I'd ever seen. But it goes back to what the players tell the. It's like he said, you got to tell the players what you want, and how to play and showing them what toughness is. You'd be surprised. A lot of players don't really understand what toughness is. But we're teachers.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that I wasn't coaching during the COVID, but I talked to a lot of coaches, and it was amazing to me how coaches made things work. I don't know how these kids got through COVID without the coaches. Whether you were doing it by Zoom meetings or staying in touch with your players. Coaches are problem solvers. I've always believed that. We had a conference guy down when I was at Monroe, and the commissioner had said something about you coaches got to make this work. And that got me sort of upset. I said, we make it work every day. I said, you don't know what you're talking about. I was ticked that, coaches play an unbelievable role in today's kids. I think, the influence I had with my coaches, I don't know how high school can work today without coaches in their school.
Mm-hmm.
And, the lives that they touch are unbelievable. And high school coaches today they've got my respect. I've seen what they've done. I've lived what they've done.
Yeah, and I don't know if I told you, but I've never listened to a football podcast before, Coach. So I was, people are contacting me from all around the country. Mike Marita, my friend that's the O-line coach at Lehigh, he said, Troy, everybody's talking about the podcast. So I was like, I'm gonna check out some other football podcasts. So I go to look at Bradkowski's podcast and I see Bob Trott. So I was like, this was 3 days ago. And I was like, wow, Coach Trott was on there. And then I go listen to it. And I think it's somebody talking for about 5 minutes at the beginning, but it ain't you. And then it says 5 years ago. So I had already texted you. I was like, well, if Coach Trott went on his, I get him to come on mine. So, Coach, it was funny. It really was funny. I'm sitting here doing all these podcasts, and guys are putting stuff back up that 5 years ago. But
well, it was interesting. The other day, I had a call from one of my former Richmond guys. He was out recruiting, coming home. He said, "I just listened to your podcast from 4 years ago, or whatever. I did it from AFCA too."
Yeah.
Well, you've heard all that stuff before. He said, "Yep, I heard it firsthand." But it's been fun for me. I did one for the AFCA, and if I can share things, I enjoy sharing it. And it's like it's just fun to talk football.
Yes, sir.
And we all learn from other people. I can't tell you all the times I've learned the stuff I've learned from other people, watching people. You mentioned Dante Scarnecchia. I'll tell you a little story about him.
Yeah, he's the only one that I don't have, Coach. I've got pretty much all the O-line goats. He's the only one. I've been told I'm going to get him by the New England, the big New England clinic guy, but I haven't heard back.
Well, Dante's one of these people. There are only a few people in my life that, I've never heard anything bad about Dante. Now, Romeo Crennel was the same way. I never heard anything bad about Romeo Crennel. And I said, well, then you screwed up, became a head coach. But when I first got to New England, Bill was smart enough not to let Dante go, but Dante didn't help on the offense. He helped us on defense. So I coached the entire secondary. Romeo coached the entire front, and Al coached all four linebackers. Bill was not into this. We don't need a lot of people. I don't want a lot of people. The more people you have, the more problems you have.
Amen.
And and then Dante, he kept Dante there. He said, Dante's going to take off your tape and do all that stuff. So it was pretty eye-opening for us because we had one of the best offensive coaches in the NFL. He was taking our tape off and doing that kind of stuff. He'd come in and talk to us and show us things. And it was interesting to hear from the offensive perspective. And he came in one day and he started talking about, at that time, all we talked about were turnovers.
It's pretty important, ain't it?
Yeah, and he came in and said something about, it's not just turnovers, but this ball disruption is pretty important. And that's the first time I'd ever heard that term. Now it's pretty well known, but in my mind, Dante Scarnecchia is the first guy ever to use the term and started it all. And I still got the original playbook section we did on ball disruption. And he basically said, we got a guy named Chris Slade. Every game he affects the ball. He either knocks the ball out, causes the quarterback throw a bad pass, something. He disrupts the ball every game. And from that, we came up with this ball disruption that instead of just turnovers, we talked about ball disruption. Put your hand up in the quarterback's face. If you make him throw a bad pass, that's as good as a pass breakup.
Amen, Coach. Amen.
And, but I give all that credit to Dante Scarnecchia that he started all the ball disruption talk that I understood. And from there, we talked about ball disruption. We talked about he would look at, well, this guy only carries it in his right hand. This guy carries it bad here. A lot of the things that we all talk about as coaches with turnovers and all, but I give that credit to Dante. And some sometimes I still go back and look at the original sheets and the drills and stuff that we did to enhance that ball disruption was more important than just turnovers. Turnovers was part of it. But
yeah, you gotta. It's like the chicken before the egg. I mean, whatever, the horse before the cart. You got to disrupt it.
The defensive line as much credit as we gave DBs. It's funny when I was at JMU, we got 31 interceptions in 2017, which was the most of anybody in any football, college or pro, that year. And they asked me, so do you have a turnover chain and all that stuff? I said, no, we don't do that. We don't. We just like to get turnover. We just like to get interceptions.
Man.
And I said, the problem with the turnover chain is that, we would make a big deal every Monday or Sunday about why this interception was made.
Yeah, somebody put their hand up, somebody got to the quarterback, something.
I said, I never see a turnover chain on the defensive lineman that caused that interception.
Yes.
It goes back to you want individuals or do you want a team?
Yes.
And I always felt like I don't want anything that makes it an individual game. I want our players to get interceptions, and we talked about the reason we wanted interceptions is it helped us win the game. And we constantly talked about what causes us to win and what causes us to lose, and approached it that way. And those defensive linemen, I think, took as much pride in those interceptions as the guy that actually got it. So that's why we did do the chain and all that kind of stuff. But, we still got a lot of interceptions that year, and it helped us, win a lot of games.
Yes, sir. I need to ask you this because a coach asked me this morning. Do you know these rubber wristbands that these kids wear in high schools? Like they go to UVA and they get a rubber wristband, and then they go to Tech and they get a rubber wristband, and they go to North Carolina and they get a rubber wristband. Some of these guys have about 20 different wristbands on each arm.
Oh, I've seen them.
Okay, so coach wanted to know, he sent me a text. Is there a direct correlation to the number of wristbands that a player wears in high school of all the different colleges to them getting offers and getting recruited and being a good football player?
Well, it probably means he took a lot of visits, but you and I both know some of those visits, they just went up to the school.
Yeah. I found you could buy them on eBay, Coach. You can buy college wristbands on eBay. I did not know this, but can you think of a player that you coached who was great, that you recruited and had a ton of wristbands on? Or can you name somebody that never wore these 20 to 30 college wristbands that was a great player?
Well, I've had a lot of great players that didn't worry about all that stuff.
Ooh.
The wristbands and the offers are really last 10 or 15 years where it's, and I learned that a lot of players, these offers weren't real. I don't know what a real offer is anymore.
I don't either, Coach, because they make them up.
But, I've been in schools where every coach that walked in, he's up on the board. All they talk about, and it's a way for that high school coach to sell his program that, we've got the guy with all these offers. You've been around me enough that I didn't offer a guy unless it was a real offer. I didn't like playing the other game. But, it's the same type thing and I found that some of these kids lied. You didn't really have all those offers. But if I ever offered a kid, it was a real offer, that you can take this, you can take this. I tell kids, I used to tell some of those kids, like, so-and-so offered you, then take it right now. You just take it right now.
Take it, Coach. If
and
it,
then, it's like, well, it's an offer to come to camp. Well, then they get him up to camp and they take the offer away. And then people get mad. I'm like, well, it's not a real offer. It's sort of like with the wristbands. It's a marketing type thing. But, I had kids come to JMU that I wasn't really recruiting, but they came on the visit. They all got wristbands. So,
so is it like it shows that they've been to a lot of visits or that coaches gave them to them? They're in demand. I mean, in these lanyards, like some kids, I mean, have 20 different college lanyards off their book bag. Like, is that something that Nick Saban and Belichick care about when they're looking into the draft, when they're looking at who they're going to recruit? Do they look at wristbands?
I would have a pretty good idea saying no.
Yeah.
They're just trying to find the best players.
They're just like you said. I mean, do you have any good players? And I love that HBO documentary about Coach Saban and Coach Belichick. Have you seen it, Coach?
Yeah.
Where they say they're going to spend time and talk about their families. We're going to turn the cameras off. And they turn the cameras off and boom. I saw in the last game of the year, y'all played a lot of 3-down. I mean, it went right to football, Coach.
Oh, exactly. It sort of goes back when, Bill's never off. It's like you could be talking about something completely different. Oh, do you have any players?
Yeah, it's what it's all about, ain't it? Do you have any players?
But, it's I don't know how you high school coaches handle it today. You've got, parents up down your neck. Well, you got to get my young man recruited. And now you're talking about NILs. We've screwed up this game. We've screwed up our culture, I think.
What had screwed it up? The NILs? Because I'm Coach, somebody told me I was an influencer.
You never hear them talking about college education anymore. I wish they had taken all that money and split it up and gave everybody a part of it. We talk about we're a team football game. We're a team game, but college football is now pro football without rules.
Yes, and no contracts. I mean, I'd rather be in the NFL where you at least got a guy for 2 or 3 years. I mean, this is 1-year deals.
The other thing about college football people don't understand, the NFL has 32 teams, so you have some control. You got one commissioner. When you make a rule, you got 32 teams that can go by the rule. I've been in college football for a long time. Every state has different rules. Some schools I worked at, you had to get on their retirement. Some schools you didn't. College coaches couldn't get anything done. At one time, we tried to all get health insurance, and that didn't work because every state's different. We tried to get retirement. That didn't work because every state's different. The CFA 60 years ago, they tried to pull out of all the bowls so everybody could go to different bowls, and the Big Ten and Pac-10 said, nope, we're not giving up the Rose Bowl. So, everybody's worried about these schools going out on their own, but I'm not, because they've been talking about that for 60 years. And they can, when it comes down to it, it's all about money. How can we make more money? And I remember a time when we did away with GAs to save money. We did away with athletic dorms to save money. Now everything's off the table. It's the arms race is unbelievable. I've been to a lot of facilities lately. It's unbelievable how much money's being spent. I don't know if you saw the Facebook post of they showed the locker room at LSU, and then beside it was the library.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And, well, that's true. And just to get off of it a little bit, I think that if I'm a parent today, and you tried to charge me an athletic fee to send my son to school, I would be really upset. If I was a normal student and you tried to charge my child an athletic fee after what I read in the paper, I'd be pretty upset as a parent. And the other sad part is I think the fans are tired of the Twitter, well, I enjoyed it in my 4 years, but I'm going somewhere else. I've been around enough schools that these fans invest in these players. And it's disheartening when you invest into a player and he puts on Twitter, I'm going to a different school. And I just don't. It bothers me as an ex-college coach that we've created this culture. And it always comes back just like coaches. Well, you can't fault them for taking the money. Well, that's true, but that's what society is now. You can't fault them if they take the money because somebody's going to pay it. It's funny to me that I've never seen a college president fired for not graduating his players. I've seen coaches fired, but I've never met a coach that enrolled a player, or that. We've never admitted a student. Now, we fought hard to get guys in school, but all of a sudden when he doesn't graduate, it's the coach's fault. It's not the administrators. I remember one time Tennessee had a 12% graduation rate. They didn't fire the president.
Man, were they winning?
Oh yeah, it's just like Jim. I don't know if you remember Jim Valvano. When they let him go. I remember reading an article about he didn't graduate his players. Well, he never admitted a player. I said the chancellor of NC State went to all those Final Fours. I said, it's been he coached there 10 or 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing to me when they want to get rid of you, they bring up this stuff. But when it's happening, you just want to go to those bowl games and those Final Fours.
Yes.
But you're in charge of this school. But that's I'm getting off topic here. But
hey, Coach, we can talk about whatever we want, Coach. I got you off the topic because this wristband thing. I saw these kids on the internet. They're supposedly 5 stars. Some of them hadn't even played varsity football, and they're 5 stars. If you're a 5-star to me, that means you're offered by everybody in the country, and you're starting as a freshman in high school. Some of these guys, yeah.
I remember one year I was up in Northern Virginia recruiting, and the coach looked at me and said, that 9th grader there's got 30 offers already. And I'm like, how good are his parents? He looked at me like, what are you talking about? I said, you better have some strong parents. If you got a guy with 30 offers, I bet you better tell him to take out the trash every day.
Yeah.
Or he's going to get the big head. And I said, besides that, I said, most of the coaches that just offered him won't be there in 5 years.
There you go.
The next spring I go by there, and he said, Coach, the first 5 people that offered him, those coaches aren't there anymore. And,
yeah.
I don't know how you can look a 9th grader with a straight face and say that, I'm all for you a scholarship.
I think some of these guys, they're offering them as 9th graders. Hey, wherever I'm at, I'm going to offer you. I'm going to recruit you. I think it's like a personal offer, Yeah. That's kind of.
Sometimes that works out.
Yeah.
But you've been a high school coach a long time. You've seen it all. Instead of armbands, it used to be put on Twitter that you've got 25 offers.
Oh, they're doing that too, Coach. These kids are making stuff up, man. If you, Coach, South Carolina, they're pretty good. Shane Beamer's the head coach. South Carolina, my girlfriend's from Rock Hill. I've never coached in South Carolina, but they got good football players down there. They got Clemson. They got Burns High School. Does South Carolina need to come to Virginia and offer a kid that Virginia and Virginia Tech hasn't even offered? Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I was at Newberry at
Newberry, South Carolina.
Newberry, South Carolina. The Founders Credit Union puts on this clinic and leadership thing. Well, the Newberry coaches told me their running back was just taken by the University of South Carolina. And I'm like, so what does that tell you about recruiting at the University of South Carolina? They spend millions of dollars to recruit, and they came down and got a Division II running back.
Wow.
So these schools that spend millions of dollars in recruiting, And in the whole scheme of things, Troy, what's changed? The big schools get the better players. Now they're just spending millions of dollars doing it, but it all works out. The big schools get the better players, and then it filters on down. And Richmond's going to get theirs, and Randolph-Macon's going to get theirs, but in the whole scheme of things, what's really changed?
I mean, I think the poaching,
they messed up the whole system.
Poaching the players from the smaller divisions. I mean, that was a no-no. Like, if you're at UVA, you don't take a Richmond guy, a University of Richmond guy, or a William and Mary guy, or like you said, in Newberry. Like,
Well, they do now.
Yeah, they do now.
If you do a good job coaching, you're going to lose your best players. So, like I said, it goes back to that culture. It used to be you got kids that you want them to graduate, you want them to be successful, and teach them to work hard. It's like I used to tell players when they would complain I'm not playing. I said, well, then make me play it. I'll play the best player. Make me play, and I'll play you. But you're not playing good enough to play. Bill Parcells used to tell us this, and we're all selfish coaches. We're going to play the best players. And
yeah.
So if you're make me play if you're that good. But parents have changed. I've had some parents. It's not my son's fault. It must be y'all's fault. And I've had other parents that, Coach, I gave you permission to beat his butt if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's things have changed. The culture's changed. It's all, and it's just going to get worse with NIL. I'm trying to do my brand, so I'm going to sell my brand. I don't know how you guys do it today. You just went through the May recruiting period. I'm sure you had a lot of coaches come through.
Yeah. I mean, J.C. Price told me at Virginia Tech, he made a great point. He said, Troy, we can't make the NFL guys take our players. And you can't make college coaches take your players. We can provide the information. We can let them bump into them. They can look at the huddle. They can look at the transcript. But we can't make somebody offer somebody. So I mean that.
Well, the best thing I've seen coaches do, and I used to tell some coaches, I'm like, here's what I tell players about the NFL.
Yeah.
When they're seniors, and I'll go down to like the high schools. I said, when all these scouts and stuff come in, I tell them, I said, this is a job interview for you. I said, do a resume, put all your information down, put down all your best games, put down the games you didn't play. I said, think of it this way. When that scout goes sits in that room, hand him that sheet of paper, and you've made his job easier. I said, your goal in this job interview is to make sure his job as easy as you can. I would go buy him damn donuts and bring him donuts. I would do everything I could to sell myself to that pro scout. Make his life easy, because I've had to watch college kids too when I was in the NFL, and I'm sitting there watching the tape. I said, where the hell is this guy? Now, they got Pro Football Focus now, but I said, you need to, if you had a bad game and because of something happened or you were hurt, tell the scout. Don't assume that they know everything. So make his job easier. And I said, if I'm a high school guy, I'm gonna make everything easy for that college coach. I'm gonna have, I used to go down to Texas, and the secretary, you never had to go to the school. You went to the field house, and the secretary handed you the transcript and his test grades and film and everything, and you left that school thinking, boy, this school's pretty sharp, and
mm-hmm.
And then, just like I've done with coaches, and a lot of coaches know that, I'll go in there and they'll give me the list of their prospects, and I'll thank them, and then everybody would leave, and I'd ask the coach, okay, now who do I really need to recruit? And they tell me. And but I understood the list because those parents want their son on that list. But as a college coach, you're trying to get the best players you can at your school. Because your job's on it, and I've had arguments with parents and stuff about go through the high school coach. Don't hire these other people. As a college coach, I always went through the high school coach. That's the guy that's the first point of contact and that I'm gonna trust. And it's funny, I like going to other high schools, and one of the best things I did was, and every coach can, I'd say, well, who's the best players around? Who are the best players? I wanted cross-reference who the best players were.
Amen.
The best recommendations I got was from the opponents.
Yes, sir.
And to find the best players for us. And that's all you're really trying to do is find the best player for your school.
Just like Bill Belichick said, do you have any players?
Oh, yeah. Constantly.
The next time that you talk to Coach Belichick, Coach, I don't know if it'll be a month from now, a year from now, will you ask him, did he know if Jim McNally's on Twitter?
I will ask him.
Oh, wow.
He'll probably be shocked.
Man. I mean, it took me an hour.
Al's gotten pretty good about that. When he quit coaching, he took a computer course, so he's.
Yeah, Coach Groh was excellent. He was dressed like $1 million, Coach. He had a polo sweater on.
Oh, I saw the podcast.
He was wonderful, Coach. Yeah, I'm so glad y'all are watching it, Coach.
Well, y'all have had some good people on there. But,
yeah, Coach.
What else you think of?
Is there anything on your heart that we haven't, talked about? I mean, because Coach, we're just not doing a podcast, and we're documenting history. I mean, have you ever done over an hour podcast? I mean, the one with the coordinator, that was like 32 minutes. I mean, is there anything that you want to say that you haven't already, Coach? I mean, I know you have a great family. I mean, your daughters, your wife, anything else, Coach?
Well, you sort of mentioned that with Al's thing about we are obsessive, I spent a lot of time at work, and my kids and I remember when I was at Duke one time, we were eating dinner, and my youngest daughter said, "Dad, isn't it about time to leave?" I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "We've been here 6 years," and that's the longest place we ever stayed, and I've been very lucky with my wife and my kids. My son's a scout for the Dolphins.
Wow.
He's been in the NFL about 16 years now.
Man.
My oldest daughter is a lawyer. My youngest daughter is a business account rep in Phoenix. And they're all football. One of the greatest things when we went to the national championship, Al was doing the broadcast. All my kids came. My brothers and sisters came, and those little things like that mean a lot. And you got to enjoy the good times, because there's a lot of bad times too.
Yeah.
And as a coach, I still remember all the. And I guess one thing about me as a coach, it was I look back at some of these losses we had, and I always took the approach, I wish I'd have changed. I wish I'd called this instead of that. I tried to always teach our players. We had a game one time, we threw 6 interceptions. Everybody said, well, that's why you lost. So that Monday, when we had the team meeting, I went through the list of things that we should have done to win on defense. I never mentioned the other stuff.
Mm.
And, because I wanted to understand that it is a we thing. And I really believe that it is a team. I think as a coach, you've got to really, we all say we're all in this together, but it's like a lot of things in life. Do you really walk the walk or just talk it?
Mm-hmm.
I used to get upset when I hear coaches start talking about after the practice, you guys did this or you did that. I always hated that word. We lost the game.
Yeah, one of us. OOU. OOTs.
And don't think the players don't catch up on, well, you tell us we're all in this together, but you say you and I a lot. I did hear Parcells say we twice in my career, 4 years with him. It always meant something bad. Like, we're not going to sign our contract.
Yeah, we need to get more jersey guys.
But you knew with Parcells in his situation, it was his team, and we were just all part of it. But
you knew where you stood. I mean, you knew him a long time, Coach.
It was his team, and but I've been fortunate with Ken and Fred Goldsmith and a lot of good people I've worked with. Danny Rocco's the most organized guy I've ever worked with. I've been around some really good coaches and been very fortunate to work with them and been around some really, really good players. It's sad to me that we get in our office and I was guilty too. I talk about all the pro football players I coached, but I was just as proud as the accountants and doctors and business people that I coached too. And I had a mother one time I was recruiting. She said, "Are you going to help my son get to the next level?" And I said, "You mean a lawyer or a doctor?" And she didn't think that was funny. And I said, "I'm not kidding." I said, "I just want your son to graduate." I said,
"Amen. You ain't got no control over that. You make them the best they can be,
I said, "You got more control to be a lawyer and a doctor than you do a pro football player." And I said, "If you fail your med catch, you can take them over. If you fail your LSAT, you can take them over." I said, you got a short window. I can tell you a lot of really good football players that aren't in the NFL because not necessarily things they did. They got hurt at the wrong time. They were with the wrong team. A lot of things that you don't control happened. And, they don't always see it that way, but it's true, but I'm just as proud of all my players former players that are lawyers and doctors and businessmen and husbands and fathers as I am that any of them played pro football. Now, I was fortunate enough to go to the Hall of Fame and see Steve Atwater, and that was pretty neat.
Yeah, he's a hitter. Man, he is a hitter. Would he be able to play in today's league?
Yeah, because he could adjust. He's really a really good athlete. And, Steve's a better he's just a super guy.
He's a better person. That's like Randy Cross, Jesse Sapolo, everyone that I've talked to. I mean, it's like, wow, that's the reason they made it. It ain't just because they're a great player. They're a great person, and like they're the total package. I mean,
but I've had a long list of guys that are really good football players and really good people, and I've been fortunate. And not coaching these last couple of years, I've gotten to reconnect with some of them and hear from them. We went up. Coach Hansen and I went up to the golf tournament that the JMU former players had and got to see a bunch of guys. I went to Carolina JMU game a couple of years ago and saw both sides. That was interesting. And it was really good hearing the kids, receiver. You never know what he said. You yelled at me because I didn't go get the ball in practice. And he said, "Coach, after that, I always went and got the ball." And he said, "I'm in the real world now." And he said, "It amazed me. My teammates and stuff, we talk about it. Said, some of these people we work with never been yelled at. They can't take it." I said, "Well, you guys were hard on us, but we knew you had our backs and you cared about us. We got coworkers. They just break down when somebody raises their voice at them."
Coach, I got cussed out by Coach McNally twice a week since I've known him. I mean, the last time he was peeing in a bottle on a podcast. Coach, I got Dick LeBeau to make him a message. It was a 6-minute message. I paid Dick LeBeau $59 on this Cameo site, and he got so mad because he said Dick LeBeau said he changed his technique. He said he was gassing him up. He was schmoozing him. I mean, there's been so many times he's gotten mad at me, but he can't do anything worse to me than my dad did growing up. I mean, he was a drill instructor. So, yeah, I totally agree, Coach.
But players see through all that. They know if you really care.
And,
but, it was good to hear these players. And I used to laugh and I said, wait till you get in the real world. And, these guys have all done well. I've been very appreciative of all the guys that I've coached or touched. And as a coach, you don't realize some of the guys you have touched. And it's sort of like your kids. My kids are all grown up now, and they start telling stories, and I'm like, I had no clue some of this stuff. Some of the stuff I told them, you don't need to talk about this, but you know, when the players get around each other, they're the same way. They start telling stories that some things I don't even remember, but it affected their lives. And for the most part, it's been, you know, positive for everybody.
Amen, Coach. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Coach. You're the best. I'm gonna press end here, and we'll stay on and talk for a little bit. But thank you, Coach. You're the best.
Appreciate it.
All right, so I'm gonna press end on the